Sheek Exley, an American cave diver born on April 1, 1949, was just a different species. When it comes to diving, he was one of the most decorated divers in history. He became a prominent figure in the diving community, contributing significantly to safety standards and exploration techniques in the field. His versatility led him beyond the realm of cave diving into the realm of extreme deep scuba diving, where he pushed the boundaries of human endurance and skill. Sheek's accomplishments included writing the book Basic Cave Diving, a blueprint for survival in 1979, which remains a guide on safety and emergency procedures in cave diving today. Throughout his career, Sheek conquered over 4,000 cave dives by his mid-40s, becoming known for his ability to withstand the pressures and dangers associated with extreme depth. Depth affects the body internally, leading to nitrogen narcosis, a condition that can cause disorientation and hallucinations. He was almost completely immune to this condition, which allowed him to dive deeper than most. This was particularly evident during a 1970 dive where Sheek reached 465 feet before experiencing it, and he became the first person to descend below 800 feet in a technical scuba diving accident. In 1993, Sheek learned about the Zacaton sinkhole in northeast Mexico from his friend Jim Bowen, believed to be the deepest known water-filled sinkhole in the world back then. Zacaton, with a depth of 1,112 feet, sparked Sheek's interest, leading him to plan an ambitious dive with fellow explorer Jim Bowden. The sinkhole is located in the Zacaton system, a unique collection of karst features in Tamaulipas, Mexico, and is known for its thermal water and floating islands of zacate grass. Excited by the challenge, Sheek and Jim spent a year meticulously planning the dive. They calculated the precise gas mixtures and quantities needed for the descent and conducted numerous practice dives to prepare themselves both mentally and physically. Their preparation included assembling a support team of divers, including Sheek's wife, Mary Ellen, Bowden's wife, Karen, and two other divers, Ann Kutovich and Marcus Gary. The dive took place on April 6, 1994, just 6 days after Sheek's 45th birthday. Entering the sinkhole through a 600-foot spring close to Zacaton, Jim descended first, while Sheek followed about 10 seconds later. Sheek and Jim descended rapidly, aiming to reach the bottom as quickly as possible to minimize decompression time. As they descended, Sheek's experience and skill were evident as he maintained a deliberate breathing pattern to optimize gas consumption and prevent carbon dioxide buildup. However, as Jim crossed the 800-foot mark, he noticed Sheek's light far ahead, descending at an alarming rate. Sheek continued his descent despite experiencing symptoms of high-pressure nervous syndrome, a condition brought on by rapid compression that can cause neural disturbances. At 750 feet, Sheek paused to consider his options, but decided to continue. He finally reached 850 feet deep. At this depth, Sheek's body began shaking uncontrollably, likely due to the extreme pressure. Despite his impaired vision, he recognized the lunar-like landscape covered in small rocks and black sediment, confirming that he had reached an unexplored depth. Aware of the need to ascend quickly to avoid prolonged decompression, Sheek began his ascent, and the symptoms of high-pressure nervous syndrome gradually subsided. Meanwhile, Jim, who had descended to 900 feet, was quick to notice he had consumed more air than intended, which could affect his ascent. He switched his main tank to his backup tank. In an attempt to change his air tank, his regulator broke off, causing him to manually control his air supply by opening and closing the valve with each breath. Despite the stress, he continued his ascent, eventually reaching the installed air tank at 250 feet. However, as he ascended, he realized that Sheek's descent line and stage bottles had not been used, indicating that something was wrong. As Jim continued his ascent, he became worried about Sheek's fate, knowing full well that Sheek was supposed to be above him. Kristovich, the support diver who was charged with monitoring the bubbles, noticed only Jim's bubbles were visible, causing further concern. He dove to meet Jim and was relieved he was safe, and was also shocked to see Sheek's equipment untouched, suggesting he had not surfaced yet. Upon surfacing, he realized Sheek was not present, leading his mind astray. Mary, Sheek's wife, fearing the worst, dove in search of her husband, accompanied by Karen. Both were also left shocked upon seeing Sheek's equipment untouched. Mary, fearing the worst, took extra equipment and dove deeper in search of her husband, only to actually confirm his fate upon seeing his dead body. They went back to the surface. A joyful day became a sad one in an instant. Jim was treated for shoulder pain and other physical ailments, while a support team returned to the sinkhole the following day to recover Sheek's equipment. After 2 days of effort, Sheek's body was recovered, tied with lines around his arms and the valve of his mounted bottle. His wrist-mounted dive computer indicated a maximum depth of 904 feet, suggesting that the incident occurred 9 minutes into the dive. The autopsy, though challenging due to the effects of immediate decompression and the delay in conducting the post-mortem analysis, yielded no definitive cause of death. Sheek Exley's final dive marked the end of a remarkable career in cave diving and deep-water exploration, leaving behind a legacy of courage, skill, and contributions to the diving community. One thing to note is he died doing what he loved. Imagine being trapped in a cold, pitch-black cave, the only sound your own panicked breaths, and the only company a friend's lifeless body. This is what happened 10 years ago to Ricard and Dionisio in the Cove Darket region, a place of haunting beauty that would become their final resting spot. Ricard and Dionisio were seasoned adventurers, drawn to the challenge of the limestone cave, known for its underwater photography appeal and clear waters that invited many divers. On July 19, 2014, they set out with 2 other friends, eager to explore the depths and curious to know what the secret underwater was. As they ventured further, Ricard and Dionisio found themselves navigating a series of underwater caves, their paths illuminated only by flashlights. Eventually, they discovered the entrance to the Cove Darket, also called the Cave of the Lobsters, a place few had dared to enter. The cave began with an alarming outlook, its entrance 33 feet below the surface, but soon transitioned into a narrow, unexplored section, looking like something straight out of a horror movie scene. One of their friends, sensing the danger, opted to return to the surface. Ricard and Dionisio, however, pressed on. They encountered an underwater cave not too long after they entered. As they swam deeper, the water became murkier, their visibility diminishing with every kick. When they decided to turn back, they found themselves disoriented, their exit obscured by a thick cloud of stirred-up silt. Trapped in a maze of confusion, their air supplies dwindling, they searched frantically for an escape. Amidst the panic, they noticed a small crack in the cave's ceiling, a faint light glimmering through. Desperation drove them to squeeze through the tight passage, scraping their bodies against the jagged rock. To their relief, the crack led to an underground air pocket, an improbable haven in the heart of the cave. For a moment, it seemed they had cheated death. Their escape was described as a mix of disbelief and euphoria. But the triumph was short-lived. As hours passed, the air pocket that had saved them now filled with carbon dioxide, turning into a death trap. The limited space became filled with carbon dioxide, silently poisoning the very air they breathed. Ricard, already weakened, succumbed to the toxic gas first, slipping into the water, unable to keep himself afloat. Dionisio, too, was fading, his strength waning as he tried to hold on to life. As their friends above grew anxious, the Gaius rescue diver, responsible for search and rescue, was alerted. Led by Corporal Fernando Aguirre, they prepared for the worst, assuming that by now Ricard and Dionisio had drowned. However, when the rescue team finally reached the underground lake, they found Ricard's lifeless body floating, and Dionisio clinging to the rocks, barely alive, his breathing heavy and erratic. The rescuers worked swiftly, administering oxygen and isotonic drinks to keep Dionisio conscious, though he resisted their help, confused and disoriented. It took the intervention of his diving friend, and, eventually, sedation to get him to the surface safely. Dionisio became the first diver in Spain to survive such an ordeal, but the joy of his survival was overshadowed by the tragedy of Ricard's death. In the aftermath, a thorough investigation revealed that Ricard had died of hypercapnia, or carbon dioxide poisoning. The report highlighted the risks the pair had taken, including diving without proper preparation or equipment. Despite rumors and blame, the investigation cleared Dionisio of any wrongdoing, confirming he had tried everything to save his friend. The events that unfolded in that dark, underwater cave serve as a grim reminder of the fine line between adventure and disaster, and the need for caution in such environments. Number 3. In 2001, 3 daring explorers set out on a journey to Antarctica, unaware that their adventure would soon spiral into a colossal disaster. The expedition was led by Jill Heinrath, a legendary cave diver renowned for her fearless exploration of Earth's most treacherous caves. Alongside her were Wes Giles, an underwater cinematographer, and Paul Heinrich, a fellow expert diver. Their ambitious goal was to become the first to dive into the caves of the B-15 iceberg, the largest iceberg in the world, nearly the size of Jamaica. Despite their enthusiasm, they were venturing into the unknown, with no certainty if the iceberg even contained a caving system. Yet Jill believed in the possibility of finding cracks and tunnels worth exploring. As they arrived and beheld the iceberg, Jill was struck by a profound sense of privilege and awe. But beneath that awe lurked a deep-seated anxiety. This was uncharted territory, and the frigid waters of Antarctica posed dangers they had never encountered before. Their adventure began with a risky situation. As Wes prepared to dive and capture the first photographs, his suit began to absorb the freezing Arctic water, transforming it into a deadly water balloon. Jill, well versed in the issues of cold water diving, knew that every second in such conditions could be fatal. Fortunately, they managed to get Wes out of the water just in time, and he was quickly bundled up to get rid of the cold. When it was time for Jill and Paul to make their descent into the iceberg, the initial plunge was a shock to their systems. The icy water hit them like a sledgehammer, stealing the air from their lungs and sending a chill straight to their bones. As they adjusted and began their dive, they found themselves surrounded by a surreal, slushy mix of broken ice. Pushing through, they descended to the ocean floor, where they encountered a haunting landscape teeming with beautiful sea creatures and stunning ice formations. The beauty of their surroundings was overshadowed by a growing sense of dread. As they ventured deeper, the creaking and groaning of shifting ice filled the water around them. Then, a violent vibration shook the very core of their beings. When they attempted to return to their entry point, they were horrified to find it blocked by a massive slab of ice. They were trapped, and the icy depths of the Antarctic Sea threatened to become their tomb. With a stroke of luck, they found another exit and began the grueling ascent, pausing at 20 feet to decompress and avoid the bends. When they finally surfaced, Wes and Matt, who had stayed on the boat, were overjoyed to see them. But the terror of the dive still lingered, the memory of the ice closing in on them like a vice. The next morning, their determination had not waned. They dived again, pushing further into the iceberg's depths, driven by the allure of the unknown. But this time, the ocean itself seemed to turn against them. A fierce current pulled them deeper into the iceberg, away from their planned route. The light within the icy tunnels played tricks on their eyes, making it impossible to gauge distances. They drifted, disoriented and powerless, for what felt like an eternity. When they finally emerged from the iceberg's grip, they were greeted by an even more terrifying sight. Their boat was gone. The colossal wall of ice loomed above them, blocking any view of their surroundings. The realization that they were utterly alone in the Antarctic wilderness, with no boat in sight, struck them with a primal fear. After what seemed like an endless search, they finally spotted their boat. The current had torn it from its anchor, but by some miracle, Wes and Matt had managed to regain control. The sound of Wes's voice as he called out to them was the sweetest sound Jill had ever heard. On their third day, despite the escalating dangers, they decided to dive one last time. Wes, unable to resist the pull of the iceberg, joined them in the water. But the current had become even more vicious, threatening to sweep them away. As they struggled to ascend, the walls of ice around them became slick and steep, offering no handholds. Jill, drawing on her experience, remembered that fish often hid in small pockets in the ice. Clinging to these, she led Wes and Paul back to the surface. Once safely aboard the boat, the gravity of their adventure sank in. They had narrowly escaped the iceberg's deadly grip. As they prepared for what could have been another dive, a loud noise broke the silence. They turned to see the cave they had just left collapsing into the sea. The realization hit them hard. Had they still been inside, they would have been crushed or drowned. This bone-chilling experience highlights the thin line between adventure and catastrophe. Despite the dangers, Jill, Paul, and Wes's bravery and determination have left a mark on the history of exploration. Their story is proof that human beings won't deviate from their quest for the unknown no matter what, which has led to a lot of the amazing facts we now know about the Earth.